And the next session is also about the reinventing financial services in the age of disruption. The moderator for this session is Kun Thana Pothikamjorn. So on this behalf, may I pass on the stage and the microphone to Kun Thana, please. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the moderator and all the panelists onto the stage.
All right, welcome to the session on driving future of the digital financial landscape. I'm very honored to be here today talking to everyone here. But before we jump into the topic, let me introduce our very honorable, distinguished, and three very good-looking guests to the right of me. So I'll first touch off upon, just to my right, this is Kun Thakon Piyapan. We're honored to have you here. He's the president of TMB Thanachart. So he'll give us quite the view on how banks and like many banks merging together are looking towards the digital financial landscape. Second to my right, we have our very own BOT Assistant Governor นะครับผม คุณทาริศ ปั้นเปี่ยมรัตน์ นะครับผม so he will be able to give us quite the view on how the regulatory environment and driving the regulatory constructs to help us drive a better digital financial landscape. And finally, to my far right, we have from Ant Group, the head of Alipay Plus Southeast Asia, Mr. Jia Huapan, or you go by Gabriel, so let me call you Gabriel for today, all right? So pleasure to have all of you here today. We're here to talk about the future of the digital landscape. But before I talk about future, I think an intro to it, the main thing we see is change. We see a lot of change going on. Change driven by the industry, change driven by the environment, and changes all across from the consumers to the players to the regulatory environment. So that's where we're going to touch upon the big change that we see in the past before we look towards the future on how we're going to respond to that change and some of the strategies to drive the change forward in a progressing way, right? So we'll be able to see quite from different point of views from our speakers today. And to jump forward, well, not to jump forward, before we look into the future of our digital finance, I think we first look backwards. So I want to jump into, at least from a regulatory point of view, Kun Tharit, how do you see changes in the past? What have you been monitoring? What are some of the evidence you see of change? And what has BOT been kind of the projects that BOT been driving that have caused these changes or been a successful platform in fostering the change?
I think I'll share with you what we have done in the past. Many initiatives came out during the past year, but for simplicity, I will group into three areas: e-payment, information-based lending, and data portability, which is a very important part of open banking. Let's start with e-payment first. I think it's quite common nowadays for people to use QR code and Pump Pay as their first choice of payment, not cash. That's quite a success. And the number of usage surged during the pandemic. And not only the domestic use, we can go overseas and use QR code for payment seamlessly in 6 ASEAN countries. And also our nation's most favorite vacation spot, Japan. And to think of this, I think it's quite significant the other way around. Citizens from these 7 countries can go to Thailand and use QR code to pay in Thailand. And it's significant because Thailand is a big tourist spot. For them to be able to pay conveniently, perhaps they will spend more, and they like us more and come back. That's the first thing that we do on e-payment. The second thing that we do is on information-based lending. I think nowadays what we hear, what we have been doing is that we allow banks to use information other than bank account movement to assess creditworthiness of customers. we see a lot of partnering between banks and the like of telco e-commerce platform that's enable bank to reach more of the unserved group. And that's not only on the bank side. We also grant license to digital personal loan lenders. There's 9 companies that we already grant. That's on info-based lending. And lastly, on data portability, which is, I already mentioned that it's a very important part of open banking. With this, NDID, e-consent, what else we have? Open API. All those will enable people to do transaction with more convenience. People do not have to go to bank branch and ask for, their bank statement and go to the other bank to submit this statement. All this can be done online with convenience. I think that's all that we think is success during the past years.
All right, thank you. I think it sounds like just 3 little things, but I think that is 3 quite big momentum changing things for Thailand, right? So we have the basis of all the transactions, we give them more access and exclusivity to lending, and we give them access by having an easier KYC and information. I want to jump in myself as one of your personal loan providers with alternative lending, but I'm here to moderate today, so I'm going to shut up and be at the back and let you guys.
We asked the question.
No, give the stories. But I think as Kun Charit told us about kind of the fundamentals, I'll jump to you, Kun Thakon. From a service provider, right? How have you kind of seen those movements? How have you put those kind of new constructs, new regulations into action? I mean, you're a veteran. You've seen prompt pay from the beginning. You've been in the consumer finance, both also on the NID end. So in your terms, what are you seeing as the change in your mind, and what have the institutions?
How far you want to go back?
Just 5 years, like 2017 at the beginning of prompt pay.
I'm old enough to see the first ATM machine, okay? And you know that the bank has gone through the digital transformations. One of the success is that we used to have the bank holidays on 1st of July because we want to close the half year, clearing up the settlement, this and that. That holiday disappeared. That's the result of the transformation, that one thing. But again, I put that joke aside. I guess we've gone through a lot of transformation, as Peter just mentioned. I used to remember in the year 2015 when we started doing a mobile banking, which is only just a few million, okay? But today, registered account is more than 90 million. But in terms of the individual Thai people who use a mobile banking, perhaps 70% of the population, at a certain extent, is using the mobile banking already. But as a result, you see that with the collaboration between the regulators and also the banking industry, we create a lot of common infrastructure, which is different from the other country, I guarantee. One, we start with the national e-payment, the prompt pay, and then we use the technology of prompt pay to create the QR payment. But then we start seeing the opportunity to jump leapfrogging to do a pure digital banking by developing the eKYC, National Digital ID. Nowadays, you can open the saving account online at any time, anywhere. Then you can do the digital lendings on the mobile as well. And now we develop the blockchain technology together, creating the BCI, starting with the LG service, but now I think the supply chain financing will be next. And we're talking about the open data, open API, open banking. We start seeing not only the collaboration, but building the infrastructure together. I think as the result, we see a lot of usage. We see a lot of customer has been living their life on the mobile, but everything that we have to do is now putting on the mobile. But it's come with the cost. The cost is that on the 1st and the 16th of every month.
At 4 p.m.?
At 4 p.m. The only thing we need to know is just we play and hope that the mobile, the server will hold the transaction. and not because of the that because of humongous transaction on the 1st and the 16th because of the online lotto, which is the bank has built the infrastructure, but for that particular transaction, which is quite odd. But on the other aspect, it's come with the cost in such a way that the transaction fee is disappeared. Kun Tommy, if you recall, Peter, if you recall, banks start waiving all the fee. The transaction that you do online, money transfer is free. Some people take it for granted. Even 1 baht, 2 baht, they make a transaction. But the bank has to invest to build the infrastructure to accommodate such a transaction and growth, which is coming back. That's not the only cost that we have to invest. The regulator is also introduced a lot of a governance policy, which is at the end we still have to invest to cope with that. But most of the business is good one. It's help the country to balance the risk and also control good governance. But then I'm not sure whether I answered the question.
No,
What is
but
your
you
question?
can keep going. It's
What's your
stories.
question? It's just talking
All
about
the
the history.
change. Yes,
All
the
change.
history. Walking through the history.
But I guess now I think we are in the times that it's quite fascinating for me what would be the next level of the digital banking. I have the file chat with the Peter Ritt about soon the central bank will announce or I would launch the virtual banking, which will be another interesting topic that we can actually ask him more. Not today. Not
ready yet. Okay.
But at least to give the spike that the transformation is continue to grow and it continue to be much more aggressive, and the banks and also people that involved with the financial service has to be prepared. I guess I'm not sure I answered the question, but I coming back.
At least you touch upon. I think I grabbed at least 2 key things that we'll ask and talk about a little later. We see that we have driven a lot of consumer changes and consumer convenience, but not all of it comes positively. Some of it, at least from a service provider, there's also big challenges, both by cost or by structure and how we regulate that. So I think I'll jump in the next section a bit later to ask you, what strategies do we use to kind of manage that as service providers? But before we're going there, I also want to we're talking about Thailand. We have Gabriel here today, so he can give us at least a further view beyond borders, across into Southeast Asia, or some of the things he sees beyond in Asia itself, right? So what are you seeing? What are some of the similarities or difference in the change you see? And if you can also touch on one extra. I know a lot of times we talk about the positive of changes. Since you see quite a different view all across different countries, are there also things that are challenges or on not negative, but challenging, and the change are taking us to a bit harder times?
Right. So actually the biggest observation that I have, like, since 2014, 2015, that's where the China's payment industry really take flight, and to see the offline payment also comes into play. Right. The first way that we see is that how soon you can get rid of your physical wallet. And to begin with, the physical wallet shrink and then it disappear. And then I moved to Singapore in 2017, 2018. The process go again. But it is to the point that, I mean, I'm in this industry, I'm reaping the most of the benefit. But for some, like what we see in Singapore is, like, for some of the senior citizens might not be able to reap those benefits, and the government comes into play to fill into the gap where the senior citizen is not have a smartphone to expose to certain modern technology, and that's where I mean we always realize that there's a priority of different things, but for the scalability of the technology itself, it might comes to some of the minority group will be at the end of the priority list. And for example, my colleagues in Thailand over here, who is not a Thai citizen, and now he has still have the difficulty of KYC himself in some of the local wallet. I mean, we do see that the minority group where the technology may need to catch up in the future, right? I mean, that's the one of the thing that I observe. But above all those, I think in most of the case, the benefit of the technology is still way grow beyond those drawbacks. I would believe that the technology will come to the point to fix something and one thing along the way. Right? I think that's the observation that I have.
I see. I'll get back to you and see how you're enabling kind of that positive growth. But I'll jump back to Kun Thakon. Again, as we were just talking just now, as you see all those probably opportunities and also challenges. So I think in our next section, I want to start looking forward, see how you guys are responding to that change. What are some of your visions, strategies, or best practices that you're transforming? I know this is TMB Thanachat. You also have a merger to realize synergies, but realizing that synergy of cost, also how you're looking forward into kind of tackling the future. What you see is interesting.
I think technology is also fascinating, but I perhaps want to bring everyone back to the normality or the foundation, which is whatever we do is actually we want to stay relevant to the customer. By meaning that, I think we have to understand what the customer wants from inside out and outside in. And we have to do it in such a way that the customer has a very good experience when they want to get the service or getting the product from us. That's what we want to do. And at TTB, I think we're not trying to build a super technology that can bring everyone back to the moons or to the star. But in fact, we want to use the technology and data to drive the financial well-being for Thai. Be it use the technology and data driving down the cost for the consumer. If they were to get the lending, they should get the right lending at the right price. If they want to get the service or the payment, they should get it at a very convenient way at the cheapest cost. Not the cheapest cost. Reasonable cost. Reasonable cost.
Fair cost.
Yes. And whatever we do is actually we have to do it on mobile because that resonates with the way that the consumer is actually live their life already. And plus, we cannot do as a standalone. So as Peter Rich and Gabriel mentioned, it has to be collaborate, meaning that we start seeing partnership banking. We start seeing the collaboration and such a way that if we want to live life together with the customer, we cannot just do just on the bank aspect, but perhaps do as the life cycle of the customer. Meaning that, for example, if the customer wants to buy a car and gets finance of the car, how we can actually be there before they want to buy a car. And then if they want to buy a car and they want to get the finance, or if they want to sell the car, how can we be there and assist them? So I think that's how we want to be different, but in a meaningful way. Not just talking about the technology, talking about the digital asset, talking about the cryptocurrency, but back to the reality that what customer want. Have we delivered them in such a way that is productivity and efficiency already or not? I think that's how the TTB would like to change the way we running the bank, change the way we offer the financial service to the Thai people.
I want to jump back and I'll dig on you further on that. I think it's a good point. We have been driving customers to self-serve for the longest time. They're doing transactions. But in a sense, leaving them there, we don't understand them so well, like the relationships we used to have when it's face-to-face. Obviously, that doesn't scale, but it's still meaningful relationships. So how do we get back to that? I want to jump back there a bit later, but might as well jump to Peter and say, you talked about connecting, integrating, and kind of getting ecosystems and financial services together. I'll open up a bit wider to say, driving forward in that future in where things are more connected, what are some of the projects or some of the regulations and frameworks that the regulator looks at to be able to assist and help kind of that transparency go across industries?
Thank you, Kap Kuntana. I think what we will do in the near future is that we will continue what we did in the past, but try to be more strategic, try to be systematic. I'm not sure whether any of you have seen our financial landscape directional paper. It came out sometime in February this year. It laid out all the plan that we plan to do in the next 3 years.
Read it 3 times.
3 times, thank you. And I think the end game that we want to see is for the underserved group being served more and more. And also for the already served being served more cheaper and with more convenience. That's the end game. How are we going to get there? I think we want to create the ecosystem where the financial system can be more open. When I say open, there are 3 open, laid out in the directional paper again. Open infrastructure, open data, and open competition. I go one by one. On open infrastructure, there are existing infrastructure in place, but we like to make sure that it's open to all players with fair price. When I say fair, it doesn't mean equal, but it has to be fair. So we will look at infrastructure that we have in place, whether it's in line with that principle. That's for existing infrastructure. We also would like to build a new infrastructure for business. The PlumPay has been quite successful for individual payment. We like to do the same for business. The PlumBiz will do 3 things. First, they will support digitization of business when it comes to trade process. All this invoice, receipt, payment, it will become e-invoice, e-payment, e-receipt, e-tax invoice. Those will be put on a platform. That's the first thing that the PlumBiz will do. Secondly, right now, all banks do have system for business, to make payment conveniently, but the PlumBiz will be the kind of common platform to connect all the banks, switcher if you like. That's the second thing that we hope the PlumBiz will succeed. The third thing is that after we accumulate sufficient amount of data of this e-invoice, e-receipt, it will be very useful for to access debt serviceability of business. That's the other use case that we look at. That's coming. And the last one that I like to mention, people already talk about CBDC. We also had some experiment in this area. But what we like to do is that we want to make sure that it add value to the system. Right now, we all can make payment very conveniently with QR code, e-banking. But we have to find use case that CBDC can deliver. We just organized this policy hackathon on CBDC, and we see what we can do to come up with really good use cases. That open infrastructure. On the open data, I already mentioned about data portability. We will see if we can come up with more use cases in this data portability. The other area that we will be looking at is how to enrich or enhance database architecture that we have in place. We have a gigantic amount of data sit with the banking industry. Also the same with telco, the same with e-commerce platform. How can we make use of all this? It's easier said than done. More easier said than done, because all this sit with different entities, with different regulator agencies. And also we have all these PDPA. So we have to find the right architecture that fits for Thailand. That's open data. And lastly, on open competition, we already have newcomer in place, digital and non-digital. On non-digital, we have this, you have heard the news, the leasing, and so on and so forth. On digital player, Pithakon already talked about virtual bank. We look at many cases, overseas. Some succeed, some merely survive, some fail. We want to be on the success on the success side. So there are a lot of things that we have to look at, and hopefully we will come up with the right solution, and we will provide you with more information on this, perhaps at the end of this year or early next year. That's on open competition. Just being said all that, we have to be very humble about all this, because there are many things that we don't know, many things that we don't really have experience. So we have to listen to the industry, the end user. And I think many of you here also are those who we love to have conversation with. And if you would like to talk to us, you can make appointment, and we would love to hear from you. That's all for the next 3 years.
Many opens, but I think as from a BOT point of view, I feel that open-minded to test out and see how we drive it forwards. But Peter, you were talking about quite a few things on kind of leveraging data, driving small businesses, and looking at competition from many different types of players. And that's where I'll throw it your way, Gabriel. Seeing the Southeast Asia kind of region, you see various players, both traditional, non-traditional, kind of looking forward to engaging kind of that digital landscape. I think from your view, how you see probably yourself a bit more from a technology firm, both differentiating, competing, and trying to enable businesses to be competitive going forward.
Right. So actually what we see in the Southeast Asia is that, we talked about the change previously, right? We do see a lot of moving from the traditional way of doing business and to the digital way of doing business, right? But we've done it, Thailand has been a very successful case because of Pay and all the infrastructure that we have. But we do see the digital world doesn't have a strong sense of border. It proliferates across the border. So that's where we see ourselves. How can Alipay Plus can help the business, at least in the payment side, and also the small business. How do we do business across the border instead of only the domestic transaction? So we do understand. So Alipay Plus is actually to institution service to enable banks app and other stuff to be able to pay outside of the country. That's the first one. And the other way we see is that we do help the local, the acquirer, and to help the local merchant to engage the international customer, to engage the customer outside of the country. So where we will see more and more, and that's an incremental part of their own small business itself. So we try to see that payment, of course, is our key business, but we try to build beyond payment, right? We try to engage the customer for the entire journey and to help the small business to complete the entire transaction. So that's where we can help in a way. But in the past few years, it has been quite successful online, simply because we're stuck online because of the COVID. And we see over here in 2020, in the April, more or less April 2022, we begin to see the international travel is coming back. So we're doing more and more, engaging more and more partners in the way. And we strongly believe that we strongly believe in 2023, 24, and people will come back again, cross border, and then where we do see that how each of ourselves using our very familiar local app outside of the country. And I do believe that all the G2G initiative have the same inspiration of that. And that's what Alipay Plus is trying to help to solve the problem, to provide the solution as well.
So Gabriel, I think you talked about going beyond payments, and I think we had a little chat before we came up here too. I mean, people know Alipay as that giant payment, and right now you were just actually telling us about payment is just part of the picture. You're trying to get deeper into that consumer or that business life before the payment. You're trying to engage them, and the payment is kind of that last thing once they have that kind of engagement, whether they're kind of going shopping or doing other things. Can you maybe just give an example so other people understand kind of that beyond that payment? What are some examples where you're kind of getting into that ecosystem, trying to be part and integrating before you enable that last payment step?
Right. So let me give you an example. Right. So Alipay China is actually one of the biggest wallet in China. Right. We engage the customer directly, but then we can somehow help the customer to get to the best merchant that they can find in the most reasonable price and most suitable services they can obtain, right? That's where Alipay China, we engage our customer directly. But Alipay Plus is actually the other brand, other service outside of China of N Group that is really to institution service. In some cases, like for example, we can enable TTB's app to use in other countries, in Europe, for example, in Hong Kong, for example.
You promised we go first.
And then the way we see it is that previously you don't have the way of finding really what is really the local is doing, right? If you're using your traditional way of payment, for example, cash, right? There is no way that you can find any information about the local, right? But with the app, you're familiar as app, like TTB's own app, but with the solution of Alipay Plus injected in, you can actually see the locals' interest, locals' attraction, and enjoy the trip while in local. And you don't need to go through the hassle of money, getting the local currency notes, and you don't need to hustle to download the local payment app in this regard. So that's the beauty of this interoperability we're trying to create.
Yeah, so I think it's more touching on how ecosystems, different financial players interoperate. I'll throw it back to you again, Pierre, because I think we had, as you opened up, how you wanted to understand the consumer a bit deeper, which Pitarit was talking through, the open infrastructures that may allow us, or I think in your case also, looking at different ecosystem partners to be able to get more insightful. Can you share maybe some examples or some kind of product areas that you're focusing on utilizing that better relationship to be able to be closer to that customer, or even challenges how that you're seeing on getting that relationship back to basics?
Right. I guess we heard a lot of oftentimes about ecosystem, and what I mean is that how you can collaborate with each other and stays on the system together. I think that's how we want to build the relationship based on the ecosystem. And we give the examples in the earlier of my discussion about the auto loans. Of course, the TTB is quite large in terms of the auto. We want to build the ecosystem on the, we call the car ecosystem. So like I put the examples that how can we be there before they need a car? And how can be ready when we want to get the new car again, or they want to sell the car. Similarities, how we can be there before they need a home or a house. How can we be there when they want to settle or selling the homes? The bank cannot do it alone, so we have to partner with the auto dealers. We have to partner with all the auto-related activity to stay relevant to the customer, to the entire journey of their lives as well. But the beauty is that the only ingredients that will help us to achieve such the competitive in the ecosystem is by leveraging a data. The bank has a certain amount of the data, but the partner has a lot of data. And you know, because your company is also partnered with Lines and K-Banks and others. So I think that's how the beauty of the collaboration and ecosystem is just by joining the value of the asset together, which is the data is the key one. So going forward, the success of the digital transformation relied on not the technology, but it relied on how you use the data at the meaningful way, how we can dig and find the insight of what the customer wants and perhaps predicted what they actually need by using the mobile as the mean to communicate to the customer. Once again, I'm not sure I answered your question.
I think so, but if you can, I'll leave it to you there. But if you can think, or is there one example somewhere where it's like, that's a great way to utilize? But first, I want to throw to Kuntarit quickly, as Pithakon said, there's so many of these kind of data aspirations, which change. What?
I think about that one. I was to endorse when Kuntarit talking about the open data. And you know that there's collaboration between the bank to do the e-statement. Banking statement is the most painful one for every single one of us. And when we talk and agree that, we should do the statement portability. And you know what? The 10 or 13 bank, every bank has a different structure of the statement. By building the common statement is already painful enough, but we actually succeed to do it on that one. So now, if the customer wants to ask for the e-statement or the statement and send to whatever and wherever they need, they actually can just do it by a click in their mobile apps. That's a super breakthrough to me. And that's saving a humongous cost for the entire industry. I think when you said that we are waiting for the next use case, that all the banks should do it together, because this is the example that it's good for the customer, it's good for us because it's driving down the cost, and it's actually very good for the customer as well. I got the example.
And good for competition. So, I mean, the customer has access to their data to whatever service they want. Yeah. I would love to tap into that, but I'm a non-bank. But anyways, back to there. We're seeing a lot of different players, and I want to ask everyone also, right? You see all these collaborations, banks, non-banks, huge ecosystem players doing financial services. So a lot of new faces, a lot of different faces, right? From a BOT point of view, how do you view on regulating that equally, right? Everybody is quite advantageous or disadvantaged in many different ways, and you're trying to get them to compete well. How do you balance that?
I think right now we already see that banks and non-banks engage in the same business, like personal loan, leasing, and things like that. We have the framework, so-called framework, the framework so-called activity-based supervision, where if you engage in also in leasing and also another non-bank leasing company, they put them under the same regulation and the same kind of supervision. That's the key. And also we acknowledge that for some business like leasing, there are many small companies that are also doing the same. So we use the framework so-called risk proportionate. That means that if you do have high risks both to the system and to the consumer, the intensity that we put on when we supervise them will be higher. And that is true for market conduct and for IT, because those are two key areas that will will have direct effect on consumer. Yes, two things.
So level regulation and take a look at risk to keep it proportionate. Maybe Gabriel, you're seeing so many different types of competition in different markets in different ways. In your personal view, you see any advantages going certain ways, or you see any trends on certain type of players dominating a bit more?
Yeah, so I would say that from the global trend, right? Every non-bank is trying to become more bank-like, and any bank is adopting more and more the tech side of it, right? So I would believe that like we just mentioned, right, the risk-based governance might be the best option that we have over here. But we do see that it might be the technology brings these two together, because traditionally financial institution has been very labor-intensive, right? People need to know, understand the business. And with the technology's help, I would see that in both sides can benefit with each other in creating the backbone of the economic activity to support the development of all the peoples, I would say, and become more and more inclusive, I would think.
All right, I'll jump into our last portion, and I think from here, I think we just want at least maybe suggestions or recommendations, last words from kind of everyone, how you see kind of the forward-looking landscape going. And I'll start again from Peter, right? So from BOT point of view, I mean, if you look at past changes, future changes, both in the user, the consumer, and kind of the industry as a whole, is there any view that you kind of try to manage besides risk? Kind of what ways do you kind of suggest going forward to have the most healthiest progress towards a kind of healthy future landscape?
I think we all know that we are living our life more and more on digital world. So for consumer, I would ask consumer to be aware of cyber risks. We see more and more cases, and so what we're trying to do is that we try to educate them through financial literacy, but that's not sufficient. So we have to be mindful of that. What do we do on digital world? What kind of bottom they are about to click, and those for consumer, and for business. I think, as I already mentioned, that we are living our life more and more in digital world. So that we have to adopt digital first mentality. Whatever solution they want to provide to their consumer, they have to think that there should be one digital strategy included in order not to be left behind. So those two suggestions from me.
All right, I'll jump to you, Gabriel, and maybe from a business's point of view or small business point of view that you try to integrate and enable. So any suggestions on how small businesses can react to the changing future, what you would recommend to them, how they kind of progress towards a more digital world?
Yeah, of course, I think for the smaller business, right, the scalability of getting the technology might not be as good as the bigger one, right? But try to embrace the technology as soon as possible, simply because it's not only for 2022, 2023. It's in the next decades to come, right? I would say it's beyond financial, and it might go. The mindset can go very deep into their process, the business, the lead origination and everything. I think it's the mindset, but it might well to begin with the payment side, the financial side first, simply because the availability of this service it's more ready, and try to begin with that point to re-engineer the entire process of the business itself to embrace the future. I think it's actually the starting point of it, to adopt the mindset to make this process to begin, I would say.
All right. And to you, Khun Thakon.
Keep the best for last.
Keep the best for last, as always. But what do you see as success from a banking institution point of view, and also from your customers? What would success look like in 3 to 5 years?
Oh, tough questions. How come you keep the best.
Or you can talk about anything you want.
But
Your wisdom.
it's actually caught me that the challenge is that how the bank can maintain profitability in the environments that now the household debt is high, the NPL is rising, the cost to operate that is not actually coming down as fast as we thought, while we still have to invest in the infrastructure, data foundation to cope with the regulatory in this one. So again, that would be the challenges. But with the challenges, how can we more creative in such a way that we introduce the new service and new products where we can actually serve the customer better and hope that they can actually do and retain with us more and more. Because as is upcoming of the competitor and competition, it means that there will be a lot more coming in that want to do the same business as the bank is doing. So I think that would be the challenges. But I want to touch a bit when the Gabriel talking about the small shop on this one. I think the technology actually already help all those small and SME. And for those that already adopt, just even using the mobile apps, like a food delivery during the COVID, for those small that actually in the earlier days afraid, but once they start using that one, engage with that one, I think they already survive. They already changed the business model. They start embracing the technology. I think to echo it out, the small business opened it up, study, learned, and the important point, act. And I think they will survive. They will survive. Okay.
All right. Okay, I'll keep it just right there and I'll maybe just wrap it up unless anybody wants to have any last words. The last minute is yours.
Digital asset.
We joke about that a lot, but we're not going to touch on that today, even though it may be the future of a far, far landscape, far away, maybe so, but we'll keep it pretty close by, pretty practical for today. And I think some of the key points I would take away, I think just as Kuntagon touched at the last part, it's actually empowering smaller business or just the smaller parts of the society to embrace it a bit more. Just as Ant Group always talks about, how do we bring them forward and kind of empower them, right? In terms of retail users, we see that adoption pretty clear, but we also want to bring in all the small players in the economy together. As Assistant Governor touched upon, it's not just the regulations, but how do the regulations drive both literacy and inclusivity? So we'll never forget about that part. And I think from Kuntagon is getting also back to basics. Do we understand the consumer? I know digital sounds so futuristic, it's there, you do everything yourself, but actually as service providers, how do we get to the heart? How do we still understand it and maintain that deep relationship? So I see those things as what I believe we'll see interesting services and an interesting competition landscape for us going forward. So thank you everyone today for joining. Thank you our distinguished speakers and thank you everyone listening from home. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Big round of applause to all the honorable guest speakers and the moderator for reinventing financial services in the age of disruption. I believe we see a clearer picture of how financial services looks like in 3 to 5 years. Thank you very much. Also to Khun Thana Pothikamjorn, Chief Executive Officer Kasikorn Line, for being the moderator for this insightful session.